Hi, I'm Dave Koch, and welcome to part 2 of this video where we look at compositional and style choices like lights on or lights off and what angle you should shoot a composition at. I think the object here is to show you extreme examples so you can see why we might shoot one way versus another way. I also want to point out that it's not necessarily important to always shoot lights off or always shoot at 30 millimeter. As in anything with photography, you have to make the judgments based on the scene you're seeing and your own skill and your own experience. You don't choose a camera width or angle because Dave said so. Anyway, in this video, we'll be looking at the same shot set up both wide angle right up on the scene and a little tighter backing off. And then we'll turn the lights on and lights off and see how that varies the image so that you can make that judgment for yourself. So you can see, first off, how these affect the image and then how that affects you and your choices for style and how you want to set up your images. So don't just do it because Dave says so. Do it because it's what works for you. And I think that's the most important lesson you can learn for setting up anything in real estate photography. So without further ado, let's get back into this and look at the same shot set up wide and tight, lights on and lights off. And there is a little surprise, extra little thing at the end. So make sure you watch through to the end to see my little exploration of how ISO and shutter speed affect flash. So without any further ado, let's go back to the living room in the Airbnb and see how we're going to frame up that kitchen. Okay, so I've got this set up. We're going to shoot from here, and we're going to throw kind of both things into this. We're going to shoot from back here and from right there, and we're going to shoot lights off and lights on. So we're going to have 4 different versions of lights or pictures to choose from. So let's get busy. Here's our first shot, and let's set a nice exposure. All right, this is going to be our first exposure. Let's go ahead and zoom in, get the framing I want, which is roughly that. I think we can do a focus on that. Let's put it in. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Let's level it. There we go, and this way. All right, let's shoot 3 shots. And flashes off. And now let's try that with a little bit of flash in there. And let's see what we get. I think it's still like a little bit more flash in there. So let me move this light to right over here and fill that in. I think I'll put it up here. Yeah, I think I like that. Again, no light stands. And that works, so let's go ahead and see what the final looks like. Now let's set that up and do lights on. Standby. Lights are on. And let's go do the same shot. Yeah, that already looks kind of icky to me, but let's give it a shot. Oops, I'm sorry, I meant bracket that. Okay, and let's pop a flash in there and see what that looks like. And just to make it exactly even, oops, where did my focus go? I know I have it somewhere. Put that back over here, right where it was. Is that gonna fall? No. And let's give that a shot. All right. Now let's move the camera up to 14 millimeter and get roughly the same framing. Oh, just to make a note, let's see, what was this shot at? This was shot at 30. So this is where our first shot was at. Here's where 14 millimeters is shot at. And I think that gives us pretty darn close to the same framing. So here we are, we're doing the lights on. And let's do 3. Oh, let's move this bad boy back to here. Stay. And now, look, that's me. Let's go. And let's shoot a flash version. And then let's grab that. Put it here and see what that looks like. All right, now the lights are off. Let's set our exposure for lights off. Turn the flash off and shoot our exposures. And that looks good. Bring the exposure down, turn on the flash. That looks pretty good. One more exposure, and let's move this over here. And shoot it. Well, there you go. You've heard the arguments for and against lights on, and you've heard the arguments for and against shooting super wide versus backing up and zooming in. And you've seen practical applications of both, and you've seen the final results. So take a look at these, see what you think, and see what you think works the best. Because ultimately, it's your name that's going on the pictures, so you've got to do what is right for you and what you think the best look is. So I just came across something that I thought would be a cool little bonus tip for this episode. As you probably know, I shoot pretty much everything at ISO 320 f8, and then I vary the shutter speed. I'm shooting this shot here, and this is what I'm getting. So let's go back. There's my ambient under, my ambient over, and my window pull. And then I shot this, my first flash, which I really like, but as you can see is a little dim. So rather than coming up here, and I can't even really see this and trying to adjust these and all that, knowing that this is really good, all I did was I went from 320 to 640. Here we go, try it again. And there we go, a perfect exposure. The reason that works is because flash only is affected by f-stop and ISO. It's not affected by shutter speed. I could go back. In fact, you know what? Why don't we do that? Let's do another one and change the shutter speed and try and get the same results, okay? All right, so let's try 320 again, f8, but instead of ISO, or instead of a shutter speed of 60, let's let in more light. Let's go 3 stops, or 3/3 of a stop, so full stop, just like we did with the ISO. And Let's try that. And you can see, compare that to the shot where we just upped the ISO. And let's see, let's go back to 60 and shoot that. See, that has an effect on the amount of light, whereas the shutter speed, it's still dim. So the lesson here is ISO and f-stop will affect your exposure in flash. The shutter speed will not. And since we want to keep a constant f-stop, ISO is what we change when we have a good exposure but not enough light. Don't forget to change it back and continue shooting. Well, there you go. That should give you some hopefully really good idea about the differences between shooting wide and right up on an object and backing off and shooting a little tighter, and also how lights on are going to affect the color and the mood of an image, because it's not just color. It's, you know, if you're using can lights, you're getting a very directional light down, and you're not getting natural shadows from windows and things. I don't know if I described and made my feelings super clear in the on-site video, so I'm going to use this outro to kind of let you know my philosophy and why I come down where I do on each of these techniques. Let's start with the lighting. I think the most important thing to do with lighting, well, with the photography in general, is to try and be as natural and as lifelike and as honest in our reproduction of the original space as possible. Your eyes are magical devices. They're both wide angle and telephoto. Have you ever noticed that? When you see something, you see the room, and then you see the bread or the stove or the refrigerator or whatever in it, and you're picking these things all out. And so your eye is being both wide angle and telephoto and very selective at the same time. It also is very forgiving about color temperature. Unless you're somebody as out there as me or possibly you with regard to color temperature, you don't see those differences in color temperature. Your eye fixes that. When you come into a room and there's an incandescent and daylight, your eye doesn't see that big blotch of orange or yellow that a photograph picks up, because a photograph is indiscriminate. It just reproduces what it sees. Your eye fixes what it sees. So I think part of our job is to try and get our images as close to what the eye does naturally. And to me, that is not showing drastic color problems or fixing the color problems. So to do that, I tend to like to shoot with one single color temperature whenever and wherever I can. Flash is essentially 6500, 5600. It's around in there. It's essentially daylight. Daylight is not one color temperature. It is a wide variation from, 5,000 to 10,000. Today it's on the bluer side. It's actually snowing outside today. So it's a little cooler than what bright daylight midsummer sunlight is like. Again, your eye doesn't pick this up. The camera does. When you're shooting outdoors on a bright sunny day, your shadows go very, very blue, but that's not something that the eye picks up. Anyway, all this is to say, why create extra work for yourself? If you're using a lot of daylight, the daylight's looking good, augment with a flash or two, or bounce some light in, do whatever you have to do, but stick to one color temperature and you're going to get a lot more even color. You're going to get a lot better color, and you're going to have a lot less work to do as far as color correcting. Another reason to shoot lights off is typically when you come into a room like this, you've got can lighting, which is lights in the ceiling that comes straight down. And that gives you shadows beneath objects, not next to objects. The ideal lighting, I think, is across a scene. So you've got shadows that show definition and depth, and that's very important. When all your shadows are going straight down, there's no depth, and it doesn't help tell the story of the house that well. So regardless of whether you're going to turn some of the lights on in the home or not, if you're going to turn on cans, you're really hurting yourself a lot. As far as other lights in the house, like desk lights, things like that, sometimes the effect is localized and easily controllable or easily fixable. And that light may bring the eye to where you want it in a scene. In that case, go ahead and turn the light on. If you've got a very ornate light, a chandelier or something like that, again, that's something that you're trying to sell the house with. So you may want to turn that on. I don't always turn on chandeliers, but I do sometimes when they look really good. So you have to make each judgment on lights on or lights off on a case-by-case basis. Look at the room, look at your shot. If you're just getting the corner of a chandelier, it's probably not worth turning on for. But if you're doing a shot of the chandelier, use your best judgment. Use your experience to make that decision. One thing I just recently saw online, Devin up in Windsor, I hope Windsor. Devin, don't yell at me if I got that wrong. He's in Canada. Let's just leave it at that, and we're okay with that. Anyway, he brought up the point that typically during the day, which is when we're shooting pictures, most people don't turn a lot of lights on in the home. There's very few lights on. And to turn on lights gives kind of a weird feel. It's when you turn on the lights in a house, that signals it's night, but all the shots are broad daylight. There's light coming in the windows. So it gives kind of a weird feel to the images, and psychologically, you might not want to turn on the lights. So that's another thing to consider. I know Stephen and Kelsey up in Portland too, a lot of times their realtors mandate that they turn on the lights for whatever reason. I know even when I go to a lot of homes, the first thing the realtor does is start going around turning on all the lights. And I'm like, no, don't do that. I'll take care of it. And again, I'll look at each room individually, but I think you need to set your expectations with your realtor also. Tell them, I'm not going to shoot with the lights on, and here's why. And listen to what they say. If they have a reason for wanting those lights on, I have a couple realtors that like the lights on. You know what? That's fine. That's their style, and I think we need to do what they tell us to. They're paying our bills. So another consideration. But put all this together, and then you can decide how you're going to come down on the lights on, lights off issue. It's not as simple as some people want to make it. It's not as easy as a hashtag. There are a lot of considerations to think about. But I think when all is said and done, homes generally look better with the lights off, unless there's an extraordinary reason for turning them on. That's where I come down. Now let's talk about wide angle versus that tighter shot. I think what you can see very plainly is when we're close to that kitchen and we're shooting wide, those bar stools and things do not look good. It's not because of a barrel or a pincushion distortion in the lens. Lenses today have very little, even at the very extremes of wide angle. What is happening though is you're getting a perception distortion, and that is things that are close to the lens are abnormally large, and things that are further away get substantially smaller. And so the ratio of this to that is unusual and unnatural, and people see that. Again, look at that picture where we're almost right up on those bar stools, and even though you're not getting the curvature distortion of a wide angle, you're getting the size distortion of the wide angle, and that's not the way people see. If we now compare that to something that was taken further back in the room, and with the 30 millimeter, that's much closer to what the eye sees. And the bar stools and the stove behind it look more correct in their perceived size compared to each other than they do in the wide angle. And that's why I'm saying, when and where you can, back up, zoom in, and try and get something closer to what the eye sees. As with lights on, lights off, it's not a hard and fast rule. I will shoot at 14 millimeter when I need to. That's going to be your powder rooms, your pocket bathrooms, maybe the laundry room, those smaller rooms where you just don't either have the room to back up, or they're just so small that you have to go wide to show the room. That being said, your main rooms, try and shoot tighter and pull back a little bit more, and you're going to get more realistic, more home feeling images, I think. Another thing I like to tell people, you hear a lot, shoot from the corners and shoot really wide, and you end up getting 3 walls. You get this wall, you get the back wall, and then you get part of that other side wall. And I think when the goal, as it generally is to show how big the room is, and you're showing 3 walls, you're actually, first off, people see the distortion. And secondly, when you show that 3rd wall, you've suddenly limited the size of that room. You're not showing how big it is, you're showing that it's no bigger than. And that's because that 3rd wall tells you where these other walls end. If you're shooting tight enough that you're only seeing 2 walls instead of that 3rd wall, the viewer in their own mind has to make up where that 3rd wall is, and they can move that wall around. They in their own mind can make that room bigger than it actually appears. And I think by backing up, zooming in, and thus getting some compression, you actually make the room look bigger. That's the way I see it, at least. Your mileage may vary. Again, that's why we showed examples, so that you could look at those different shots and say, oh yeah, I see what he's saying there. That room does kind of look bigger or more natural, or whatever it is that you're looking for in your photography. And that's what it's about. I will throw out my ideas, but they're my ideas. These are what work for me. They don't necessarily have to work for you. And that's the beauty of photography. People can come and they hire me because they like my photography and what I do. And this is why I do what I do. You get hired for doing your thing, and whatever that may be, good luck, and I hope that works for you. Anyway, I've really dragged this on way too long, and I'm sorry about that. I do hope you've gotten something out of this. If you have any other ideas or any hints or compliments or criticisms, I welcome them. Put them down in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them or respond to them however appropriate that may be. Otherwise, get out there, make some great images, share them with the community, and I hope your next shoot is your best shoot.